this whole chasing after the scorecard is essentially that purpose, you know, bearing down on us as a measure that we're using against ourselves because we fear something being incomplete at the end of our lives.
Hello and welcome back to the Family Wealth Edge. Kristen, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great, and I'm excited to introduce you to my new friend who I met recently this summer at a conference. So I'm ready to
Yes.
dive in.
Welcome, Chris Koenemann. Sorry, Chris.
3 syllables, Vincent, 3.
I know Kristen and I have been talking about this episode for a couple of weeks now, Chris. I'm very looking forward to learning more about you, your story, the work that you do, mainly around this topic called spiritual capital. It's something that Kristen and I have spoken a lot about and come across it a lot in our work. So we're very excited today to learn more from you, your story, and the world and families that you help navigate.
Well, it's a privilege to be with you, Vincent and Kristen. Thank you for the opportunity to have a chat.
Yeah, I think that you've done a great job, Chris, of being an advocate for the notion of spiritual capital and bringing that into our client work and helping families understand why it's important to bring all of that up. So I'm excited to have you joining us today. And I don't know, I always think it's good when people can kind of not talk about their work selves, but just kind of let us know who you are and how in the world you ended up having this specialty area.
You want a little story, I suppose.
A little story. Yeah.
Well, many years ago, started as a strategy consultant with PwC Consulting in Washington, D.C. IBM eventually purchased that unit and worked for NASA for quite some time as a client. And
Wow. Yeah.
yeah, that was fun. That's just a
Uh,
small footnote in the story,
yeah.
Vincent. Kristen knows
Yeah.
the story. So, like,
Yeah. NASA.
like
Yeah.
literally, we are going to get really long in this interview
Okay.
if we stay at these little dots. Like that's a
Yeah.
minor aspect of the story. I joined a Benedictine monastery in St. Louis, Missouri. I had grown up there. They run a Premier Boys prep school, and I had grown up in that prep school. I'd grown up in the parish that was there too. And it's notable that that group own and operate their school. They founded the school. So it's 25-ish guys who are working together, living together, owning together. Not everyone is necessarily participating in ownership. Everyone's, got that overlap of working there, some in management, some not, and eventually going to dinner every night together, that type of situation. So many of the similar systems, family systems aspects that you see in a family business or in enterprising families. Um, so there, I taught school for a few years. Eventually, I go off to Rome. I become a Catholic priest. I get an advanced degree in what's called spiritual theology, how to help people thrive by God's help. I uh, wrote a book eventually on that topic, The Grace of Nothingness. And then I come back to St. Louis after Rome, and I made the number two, like almost immediately. And I'm brought into a situation where the number one there had been there for 19 years, and he was on his way out. And so I was there to help kind of with that transition and with that succession. And there was some complexities to all of that eventually. um, and along the way, we did have a new election, and we had a new abbot. He asked me to come in as number two as well. And one thing I did say is I wanted to bring in a psychologist and psychiatrist for the group at that point and help us kind of get to the point of having real conversations on important topics. And slowly, the guys kind of gain the capacity and the trust to have those deeper conversations. And eventually, that team taught me how to take my org design background and customize it for the family business setting or family system setting, I should say. And we did a series of conversations about cultural change, which eventually become my 8 key conversations. Um, but it is sometimes hard on the inside, from the inside out, to heal a situation. And that was part of what I experienced. Um, eventually they asked the psychologist and the psychiatrist and me to stop our various works. It got complicated. I read through, for example, Doug Bomel's book, Deconstructing Conflict,
Yeah.
and
Good
I
one.
called Doug up right away. I was like, Doug, I've lived every page of your book,
Oh,
so, um, and I'm happy today to be an affiliate with Doug and help him with conflict resolution, make medicine of my experiences for other people. So that's great as well. Um, Long story short is skipping some key details that well, I found myself um with a very serious need to reconsider where I am in life. And that led to that led to going on a retreat with some hermits, and then it led to hiking the Appalachian
wait, and then hiking the Appalachian Trail?
and then hiking the Appalachian Trail.
If that's not a spiritual journey, I don't know what is.
It certainly was, and for someone who thought he had had a few spiritual awakenings already in life, I was surprised to learn that I had more still to come. I mean, you're talking like to someone who's deeply researched the dark night of the soul. Like my research in my
Yeah.
book is about like what you need to get through the deepest dark night of the soul, and strangely enough, like there's even this climax of my book where Saint Francis is hypothetically talking about getting thrown out of his own monastery, and that being the heights of like perfect joy. And I don't know. Uh, anyway, I got an opportunity in a sense, not like that I was thrown out because I wasn't, but in the
Yeah.
sense that I got an opportunity to live some of that right after I had written about it.
Yeah.
And yeah, and there was more spiritual awakening still to come. So I kept the first 500 miles were going from college buddies in Atlanta to college buddies in Boone, North Carolina. And to put that in context, like I had like 7 good friends that were not associated with the Abbey. Like I had grown up there, gone to church there, gone to school there, lived there for 17 years. So it's like friends in Atlanta, friends in North Carolina, friends in DC. Those were all the friends. I decided to walk one to the other, to the other. And I just kept
You
going.
make you Yeah, you're making me reflect on my life, Chris. I gotta get walking more. That's a great story. Keep going. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no. So the first, I'll go quickly. So the first 500 miles were healing from the trauma, which I had gotten good at, in the years. And then I jumped up to a family vacation in Massachusetts. I did the top 500 miles with 2 amazing retirees, an ultra marathoner and an Ironman. And we did the hardest technical parts in the north. For example, we helped people through hypothermia. Like we saved people from hypothermia. We got each other
Wow.
through terrible storms. We all would have quit one day, but we didn't have the opportunity to quit. The road was 2 days down the path, so we had to keep going. The next 500 miles were on my own, coming back through the middle section that I skipped, and I started to think of where to land, and that didn't have any immediate solutions to it. So, um, I thought about going to Rome. I thought about various options in the church, but none at that point were really speaking to me, and I just kept walking. And for the last 500 miles, I met an amazing woman, and she and I became best friends. And then we decided that after hiking 12 hours a day together every day, that we would, you know, see what would happen. And I moved to Brooklyn, New York, and I petitioned to start up lay life and get a job, and started as a family advisor and bringing a
Wow.
lot of these various talents. I used to be C-suite, as the number 2. I did see it
Yeah.
essentially the same as CFO work, essentially the same as COO work. Um, Bringing those experiences into this new situation.
So you go on this Appalachian Trail, certainly a physical journey, but also very much a spiritual journey for you. You thought you had had a lot of spiritual awakenings prior to this time, but what was unique about that for you that gave you the shift coming out of it?
So yeah, I mean it was quite the transition, right? Like this is one of these like many faceted transitions that happen in life that are um I don't know, surprise you. Like there's this old adage of like God closes a door and he opens a window. And I just didn't realize I was climbing through multiple windows all at one time,
Thousands
like
of them. Yeah.
and and um and that in all of that God surprised me. Like being it's the I can't put it in words great, but being bigger than I ever thought he could be. And for someone who had lived so close to him for so many years and had studied him as best as I could for so many years, like I still was getting surprised by how he was like, "No, I've got you. Like you will thrive no matter what." And that's what I wrote about in my book. Like there's this beautiful line, First Thessalonians 4:3b. This is the will of God, your sanctification, which if he's willing it, he's working on it. And if he's working on it, it means that he's trying to make me the most amazing version of me, trying to make Vincent and Kristen the most amazing versions of yourselves from this point forward. And that's like all he's working on. Like I love that notion that he's just there to help no matter what. And that there was going to be something, whatever that is, that's going to be my path to being my most amazing self going forward. And how great of a testimonial is that for all of us to hear?
Yeah. Yeah. And a great message too. Thank you for sharing that, Chris.
Something I'm curious about underneath of what you're sharing is like, I think for most people, they would say it's my job to make myself better. It's my job to develop myself. You said like this word sanctification, to make myself more holy, more intellectual, more forgiving, whatever it is. Well, that's my job, right? But you were just talking about it. This is something that like the divine is working on your behalf alongside of you via all of these experiences that you're bumping into in life, meeting you on the Appalachian Trail. Can you talk
Yeah,
about?
you have picked up on something very beautiful, Kristen. So in my book, um, every theologian writes about his or her own tension with God. You just get to like do it for the whole world to see, really. And mine is part of mine is self-reliance, like trying too much to be like, no, God, I've got this. I got it taken care of. And um, in particular, Kristen, the thing that you mentioned is really interesting. We cooperate with improving ourselves. I think we cooperate in a very theological sense with God, right? And we have to do our best and all that. There's this whole notion that like try your best and pray as if you need it all from God as well. And um but the deepest transformations, and I think this is across the board, not just a spiritual thing about the dark night, are passive ones that we just kind of suffer in life, that you can't put yourself through the trials that'll bring the wisdom, that's those deepest things that we've ever
Interesting.
learned in life. Like those are all things that happen to us. Like we go through a storm in life, or we go through an interior storm in life. I mean, those are what essentially the dark nights are calling out. And it's only when you learn how to navigate that passivity as an active, strangely enough, active passivity. It's something where you have to learn to surrender yourself actively into something that's out of your control. And you have to learn to like gain the fruits from things that are out of your control. And that's when you get really deep things that you can't just bring about on your own.
It's fascinating. The correlations with the work that you're embarking on with families, family businesses, Chris, like, 'cause we see that, especially with the rising gen, we talk about even like sometimes their lack of struggle and not taking full ownership and intentionality in their own life can lead them astray for a long, long time. And the impact that it has on all aspects of the family and individual, the way you've come about it, like I'm like, just hearing you speak, walking thousands of miles from, it's like the commitment that you make to yourself in the journey, it's unbelievable. It must be guided by something. It is guided by something bigger and broader. I think that's something that we hope for families that we work with too, people in general, that their life has this spiritual capital that we hope for. When I talk about it, I use the word spirito. I try to throw my Italian. I'm so happy you got to spend time in Rome. Like, what is your why? Like, why do you do the things that you do? I'd love for you to expand more on that term. I know it's one that you hold near. Even touch on the talk that you gave recently at this past year's rendezvous at PPI. Be interested, fascinating to hear more about that topic that you share with people?
Sure. So I love the topic of spiritual capital. I think it is a resource, a real capital that every
Hmm.
family should be drawing upon, independent
Agreed.
of like their spiritual background. I think that's everyone's somewhere there on a spiritual map, that they've experienced awe in some way on the top of a
Agreed.
mountain at a symphony before a piece of art. We've all been called meaning beyond us is where the general category of spiritual capital. I think that's like
Hmm.
I want first of all, I want first of all to meet everyone where they can be met, right? I want this to be a safe and easy conversation for anyone to enter into. That's my goal. And I've talked a little bit about my own experience and that brought the word God into it. But I think when we're talking about these conversations about spiritual capital, the questions about a higher power, like think of the AA kind of technique, right? We all need some higher power to draw us out of ourselves, or
Yeah.
some higher power to get us through those amazingly difficult transitions in life. And it's up to each of us to find that, right? And I think that we're impoverishing our conversations about family capital if we only limit it to human, intellectual, social, and financial. Those are amazing, but like we would unleash an immense amount of help, grace. I would be my word for it. If we say like, let your grandmother talk about what got her through the hardest moments of life, and just let her make a testimonial. Like, this is when I felt mercy in my life. This is when I gave forgiveness in my life. This is when I got through an impossible situation, and this is what got me through it. And in a way that's like totally not rigid, not like judgmental, just grandma talking about, hey, you may not be there yet. You may not be through that storm. You may not be through that interior storm yet either. But when that day comes, I would love for you at least to have previously heard that this is what helped me in that storm.
Yeah.
And to your point again, Vincent, like sometimes we try to protect people from storms a little too much, and they're not developing then. Like you got to
Yeah.
go through these storms, whatever they are, in order to develop deeper skills, emotional skills, relational skills,
Agreed.
spiritual skills. You have to develop a sense of self identity, like intrinsic identity. That's so big in spiritual capital. Like not
Yeah.
putting your identity in someone else or something else. Like we all too easily put our identity in success or fame or power or something that's in someone else. And that's as old as Aristotle. Like
Yes. Yeah.
that's not even like a spiritual tradition truly, but the spiritual traditions often draw attention to finding your own intrinsic identity and then
Yeah.
acting from that core to have a great purpose in this world. Um, and to continue that line of thought real quick, I think what we all have a purpose, whether we've reflected on it ever or not. We are all acting out of a purpose, and we're all using that purpose as the measure against ourselves. Like, I really want to repeat it just so people take that in. Like, we're using whatever, even unreflected purpose we have assigned to ourselves as the measure back against ourselves. And like, let's call that being the CEO of the family business, like, for example, or getting your bank account 4 more zeros or something, right? Whatever that is. And everyone's doing that. Like, independent of where you are in any spiritual tradition, you're using that measure against yourself in a very powerful way. And it's something that's out of your control often. And it's something that is more like a scoreboard than a real intrinsic purpose. Like I would give you mine, which is to love. And that's a whole different purpose to act out of. And even if you have a deep sense that your purpose is love, you still fall into the scoreboard all too often. Like can't we think of some family business leaders that they would say to their family, look, I do everything I do is for you guys. And I think they're genuine. Like I think they're
Yeah.
totally absolutely genuine in saying that. And then the family says, Dad, you've worked 80 hours a week every single week of my life. I think you need to recognize that on a practical level, you do everything for me, and on a practical level, you're doing it a lot just because you love being at work. And work addiction, stress addiction is a real addiction, right?
Yeah. Everyone's walking their own long road, right? Too. That's the other thing. Everyone has their own Appalachian Trail, their version of it.
Mm-hmm.
It's fast. I want to make, while you were saying that, Chris, I'll be remiss, just my own story and my dad's journey. And it was funny because you used the example of dad working 80 hours a week. And yeah, he was present physically, but emotionally, mentally, spiritually, for sure wasn't as present as maybe as he wanted to be when I was younger. It was only until he sold the business that there wasn't this thing between us, that we actually became super close as people, like as father and son, which it's just, you, while you were speaking that, and that example you shared, I went, yeah, it makes sense, because now the focus became on, it was almost like he closed that chapter. And now he's just like, I'm all here for you, buddy, at 65, which was, I'm so happy we had the opportunity to do that. Yeah. So thank you for that memory.
Yeah, I mean, I'm glad that you had that opportunity to do that too. I'm just saying
Yeah.
that, and he probably did love you as his number one purpose the whole way through. It's
Mhm.
just we can get practically off the mark on that, right?
Yeah.
I want to give a caveat. At times, some things become more urgent. That doesn't make them more important. Like any given week, month, quarter, year, you may just have an urgent year where you're working 80 hours a week, and that's just simply urgent, but it's not your most important thing. But if you're doing that over the long term, it's a little sign that maybe just maybe you're getting some of your needs met in a way that's not totally reflecting where you would want to spend your time or energy.
Well, I love this. Can you dive more into this, like persona that you're talking about? A person who's, very easy to get sucked into making this business work, and then once you've grown this asset, you're really wanting to take care of it, steward it, which is also a spiritual principle going forward. And it can be really easy to get sucked into this 80 hours a week. And now I've made a lot of assets. I need to prepare my next generation for this. How does spiritual capital show up practically? If that person would say, okay, I clearly do need to invest more in spiritual capital in my family, in myself, what are some of the things that people can do to get there?
Yeah, great. So I think on the practical level, um, I want people first to think about where they do find meaning beyond themselves, right? Because this, I'm letting each person define this. I want eventually to talk about that purpose and scorecard. That's where we're going to
Mhm.
end up at a very detailed
Yeah.
level. But for a second, like, if you can actually define what meaning beyond you is, then think through these practical questions. Like, what if you said, let's use that as spiritual capital for your family? Like, or I would say in my line of work, like spirituality of family. Like some people can start to define this is how it acts in that, or spirituality of work. Like servant leadership is the type of thing that comes to mind, where some people can be like, this is how I've thought through how I want to do spiritual capital in the work setting. Spirituality or spiritual capital of community. Like, how do I approach my community? How do I see others as having dignity? And how do I help form character in my younger generation of how to see other people with dignity? Like, how do I help them? The character formation is so important, right? And that's behind a lot of this too. Um, Spirituality of citizenship, like there are injustices in this world. How am I doing my part to help heal some, at least some small injustices that I can, you know, the injustices are kind of innumerable, but how can I do my part in helping to make this world a little bit better place as well? And again, character building on that. Um, or spirituality of transition, like what gets you through the dark times? What helps you deal with the unknown or the big questions of life, like death? Like, like this whole chasing after the scorecard is essentially that purpose, something being incomplete at the end of our lives. That's another thing I wrote about in my book, that one of my great things was fearing coming incomplete before God. Like, and I think that's a lot of people have that, especially more earnest people have that. Um, and ultimately we all come very incomplete before God. You know, like you eventually have to get to that point that like his mercy's got to fill me in. Um, but we all want to, at least in my world, we want to bring him gifts. We want to be like, I made this for you. Like my life is worthy, but your life may just be worthy anyway. Like I have a beautiful line, which is like, God rejoices in your existence, and then also what you do with them. Do with your life and what you do for
Beautiful.
him and for
Mhm.
your loved ones. Like you have worth anyway,
Mm.
right? Like and getting down to that bare level of identity, maybe as a beloved child of God, if you want to use a theological term, but finding that for anyone, of finding that bare bones dignity that you can even have in the ICU,
Mm.
right? And be like, it's okay
When you
if I
can't contribute. Yeah.
when you can't contribute, when you're like, I can't do anymore.
Yeah.
Um,
Vincent, Chris is getting to my tangle. Vincent
Yeah, please.
knows
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
the Rising Gen cohort, well, all of the Rising Gen programs, we talk about this term that we've labeled as a tangle, like a, I don't know, hang up that you have as an inheritor. And a common tangle, guilty as charged over here is, you've been given all of this opportunity. And so you need to show up to life and be a real contributor and give back. Like, having had such access to resources, I need to show up and be a blessing to this world, not a detriment to this world because I've been given so much I need to give back to others. And you realize at what point is that debt paid, right? Like, how
Yeah.
much do I need to be like contributing to the world to feel like I've done enough? Like, that literally will never happen because I've set myself up to fail from the very start, from the very construct of what I'm trying to do, which is an impossible task. And I feel like that's just a really common tangle that a lot of people struggle with. And underneath of that is coming into the place where you can say, I didn't deserve this inheritance. Nobody
Yeah.
deserves an inheritance. And that has nothing to do with my worth just as an individual on this planet. Like a sister of the earth alongside of the two of you, like brothers and
Yeah.
sisters in God, just worthy in and of myself without any of that.
Yeah. Fascinating. I think you think it's in the family business context. Thank you for sharing that, Kristen. Especially Chris, we've seen and experienced it personally too. When you have maybe not the wrong mentor, but maybe the wrong mentor to guide you. I think that's also important too. Like we see people chasing you said it earlier, like this wrong definition of success. They're chasing somebody else's why. And I think that's AKA the tangle that we talk about. I know that was a big struggle for me. If I grew up in success or happiness or faith is defined this way, and I'm chasing that without allowing myself to struggle. I'm going to use your Appalachian Trail example. It's on my coaching calls, your long road. It's such a detriment to yourself and this higher purpose that you can bring to the world by not, and this is hard, by actually not doing the work for you, like getting really clear about who you are, what is your spiritual capital, how do you want to show up really? It's almost like a disservice it is a disservice if you don't.
yeah, I mean, well, you have to show up as your best no matter what, right? But I think if you're talking about the journey, Vincent, like some of these journeys are not chosen. They're only chosen kind of after the fact. Like once they're like initiated, like
After, yeah,
the great hero's journey motif uh is always that you're propelled out of your village,
yeah,
right? And once
yeah,
you're out of
yeah.
your village, do you
You figure it
go
out. Yes.
learn things about yourself
Yeah,
and about the world, and then you can hopefully bring it back to your village with new skills and new self knowledge and new self awareness to reapply to the situation. But
That's Vincent's life. He just gave the trajectory of Vincent's life.
it's exactly what happened. Oh, you need a good laugh. It's good. It's healthy. Kristen, fire away.
Yeah, I want to hear more about the purpose and the scoreboard because you wanted to get back to that. And I think that there's something tied into what we were just talking about there. Certainly for people stepping into the big shoes of, the person that did whatever they did before them, right?
sure, I mean, I think Kristen, touching on what you highlighted, like those to whom much is given, much is expected, right? And gosh, like that's that's all big shoes to fill sometimes, and sometimes you just may not fill them. And maybe, by the way, in recognizing that you may never fill them, you may become the most amazing version of yourself.
Mm,
For me, just speaking from my own experience here, like I had to come to peace with like my contribution in this world may not be what I thought it was going to be, right?
Yeah.
And I made a spiritual offering in a sense of that. Like if my contribution goes down, following like this logic of this my hero, Therese of Lisieux, my spiritual offering can go up. Like maybe I won't be the person that I was like always dreaming of being, but maybe in being more at peace and just better able to give from a deeper well,
yes.
I'll be someone else that's amazing. And
Mhm,
Yeah. Well said.
you know,
mhm.
Yeah.
This
We
really
do
hit
know. Thank
home.
you. That was powerful. Yeah.
Powerful, yeah. This really hit home for me when I was caregiving for my mom. It went from like, I don't know, doing family meetings for powerful people and traveling all over the world and feeling like you're making big progress, with your coaching clients to, and literally like I would leave the office and I would go sit with my mom and work on a puzzle for like hours. So it was a switch in pace, right? Or we'd be like walking around the neighborhood. It just felt in many ways like we were doing nothing. But I had such a strong sense of the fact that that was actually doing far more, or something that was much more deeply powerful and impactful than the other, in a weird upside down, hard to understand kind of contrast.
Yeah.
see that upside down to me.
Yeah.
So like we live in a society that's obsessed with doing. Like we value doing. And just as a little caveat there, a little sidebar, every society I think orients itself to truth, goodness, or beauty. And like Italy's perfect, Vincent. They love
Mm.
beauty. They even say like to live a beautiful life. They don't even say to live a good life, right?
Yeah. La
And
Dolce Vita. Yeah.
la,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
la bella vita
Yeah.
as well.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then
Yeah.
Germans love science. They love like
Yeah.
intellect. They love like the height of German society is the double doctorate, you know. Um, it's imprecise about America. It doesn't fit perfectly. We love making a contribution and we love
Yeah.
being efficient and helpful. And so I'm going to put that into the goodness area. But we love doing, man. Boy, do we love
Yeah.
doing. Like Italians won't have a hard time going to take a siesta. Like they're like, I'll make my contribution again after my
Yeah.
siesta.
Yeah. Tomorrow.
And like, like they're like, and it's a
Yeah.
beautiful life,
Yeah. Yeah.
like
Yeah.
whereas we're like,
Yeah.
can't possibly do anything like that. Like,
Yeah. Chris, it's funny you say that because sorry to interrupt you, but even being a Canadian, I see the difference with my American friends and colleagues. There's a different pace in the US than there is even in Canada. Forget about the Italians, but I can appreciate that. Sorry to interrupt. I just wanted to add that. I even see it. I feel it.
yeah, but the whole notion of doing, like we're just so obsessed with doing.
Yeah.
And that's as humans generally, but Americans, I think we take it to a new level. And just recognizing that on the other end of the spectrum, of the polarity, if you eventually want to look at my polarity map about spiritual capital, is that is just being and just being okay being, like and like that's such a spiritual thing that like just finding peace in oneself,
Yeah.
just like and it's a struggle for us all too.
Yeah.
And I think wealth can be a catalyst to that, just like it is to many things, because especially for people, I mean, there's a dopamine hit associated with that great deal that you landed and, that amazing business that you started and all of the impact that came from it. And if I can do it once, shoot, I can't retire. I'm going to try to do it again in a different industry. That's pretty addictive in addition to just the American way of being. So that's a lot. It's a lot. It's a lot. It feels like temptation. I'm getting into a spiritual word again. It feels like temptation.
Well, not to mention that when you get a little bit of coins in your pocket, you, according to what the Jewish proverb, you look great, you look wise, and you even sing well too, right?
I've never
Like
heard that. I love
everyone
it.
likes that recognition you get from all those
Yeah.
great things, right?
Mhm.
Yeah.
But recognition is about achievement, and appreciation is about a person. And all too often, if you think of best friends, great friends, you can so easily be like, independent of your recognitions, I want to appreciate you, the person. And then we can settle down and be like, wow, why can't I just appreciate myself, the person, without all
Good
this
point.
recognition? And that
Yeah.
notion of recognition versus appreciation and sitting more in that appreciation and that being area a little bit more will, I think, just make us better at doing the rest of it.
Yeah. Good. Kristen, any final comments or questions for Chris before we take us home
Well,
on
this is
this?
hard because I feel like we could talk to Chris for another like
We'll
hour
have
and
to
a
have him
half.
back.
This is the
We'll do
good
part
stuff.
two. We'll do
But I
part two.
think, yeah, will you come
We
back for
will.
part two? Because we
Sure,
got more to ask
definitely.
you. Okay, so we'll do that in the future. But in the meantime, I bet you that people are curious about if you could say your book name again and how they can get it. Also, talk about, just define for us what that polarity situation is. And maybe that's part of what we'll talk about in part two. And then how they can contact you.
Sure. So my book title is called The Grace of Nothingness. Subtitle: Navigating the Spiritual Life with Blessed Kalama Marmion, because he's the person I kind of followed. So just a little hint there. I said Therese of Lisieux is my hero. I
Yeah,
think
that was fun.
she's for everyone. Like, everyone could benefit from reading her. Read her well before you read me. And um, she had an influence on this guy named Columba, early 20th century, and then he had an influence on Mother Teresa, of Calcutta, who took the name Teresa in honor of Therese of Lisieux,
Oh,
same person.
okay.
And then so I followed that line of thought and then applied it, with more contemporary applications for today. And it's about a humble confidence in God and how that gets you through all the dark nights of the soul, all the passive things that you end up having to suffer so as to become deeper and wiser and closer to God, and etc. But anyway, that's the basic thrust of the book. Um, and you'll see that my religious name, Caston, Cassian, is there in front of my surname, Kedeman, and but it's me. And then you can reach me at just my name. Oh, my name's hard to spell. Chris at Koenemann, KOENEMANN.us, or my website's just my first name, my first name and my last name.com.
Okay.
Um, and you had another question there, Kristen. Oh, the polarity map.
Yeah, tell us just define for us what that is so that we have like an appetizer, the reason for people to come back to watch the next
Yes.
section.
Beautiful. So the notion of a polarity map is that some things exist in interdependence of necessity. So basic ones are like saving and spending. Another one is like structure versus flexibility. Um, Inhale, exhale. There's just these basic polarities. And I put the same map out there, which is spiritual and natural. And then on the spiritual side, it's things like being, mystic, higher power, principled, noble. On the natural side is things like doing, humanistic, mutual aid, pragmatic, secular. And we need them both, is the point. Like, if you spend too much time in one pole, you only get those benefits, and you get, in fact, some overuses, which are the negatives of that side. And you need to flow back and forth between both sides of the interdependency of the poles in order to thrive fully as individuals in that particular polarity. And then I talk about the overuses, but we'll save those for another day.
Yeah.
But the real key takeaway is that we can have safe, easy conversations on these topics. Once we take away some of these things like rigidity on the spiritual side, and once we take away some of the things like reducing everything to your subjective point of view on the natural side, and once we kind of call those as out of bounds, we can have just an easier testimonial of, okay, this is what is meaning beyond me for me, or this is what helps me as far as higher power, or this is what helps me in the hard times. And then we can each get to know each other more deeply and hopefully mine those resources, which I think are some of the most transformative resources in the world for greater character, greater stability, greater resilience, so many traits.
And this is why you're such an advocate for all of that, because honestly, I think it's an area where people, for whatever reason, have stepped back and feel a bit uncomfortable having those conversations. So I'm excited about that conversation because you're both proposing a theory for us to consider in all of this, but offering some practical takeaways with regard to how to implement all of that in a way that feels more comfortable for everyone, which I love.
Yeah. Thank you, Chris. Kristen, always a pleasure. This is part 1 of our interview conversation with Chris Koenemann. Koenemann. Chris, thank you. We'll see you again. This is another episode of the Family Wealth Edge.